Okay, so the last video I made, I was actually interrupted by a phone call, and I had to take that phone call, but I didn't really want to delete the video because I'd already had a good 8 minutes in there. The video subject was about unemployment. Um, where was I? Yeah, I was talking about workfare and how I think that's despicable. Um, People may say, well, what alternative do you have? One thing I would say is that if you must have that sort of system, at least pay people. I'd be a lot less vocal in my criticism if at least they were paid. Um, it's just it is a form of exploitation to force people to work and not pay them. Now, people will say they can leave if they want, but if they leave, they lose the mediocre job seekers allowance that they get. And by the way, they have to pay transport out of that as well. So it really, really isn't that much they're getting in proportion to the work that they're doing. Um, I think it sickens me. But back to what it's like being unemployed. Even if you are on some sort of welfare, there is still financial anxiety there because it is not a massive amount. And you always have this kind of notion that you're going to have to pay it back, or you are aware that it's money from the state, so you have like there is a guilty conscience even if you've done nothing wrong. Um, in my case, I'm not claiming any job seekers allowance because I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to go through the workfare regime again. So I have no income right now, literally none. I may occasionally borrow money from my parents, but I don't like doing that. I'm not the sort of person to ask. So money is very, very tight. I have £50. I'll just come out and say it. That's my grand total, £50. I'm 27 years old, and I have £50. I have friends who've got 6,000 saved up, and they say they're worried about money. Try imagining that, £50 when you're 27 years old. It's frightening, actually. And there isn't a minute of a day that goes past when I don't feel that anxiety. It's a deeply unpleasant feeling. Deeply, deeply unpleasant. Um, there are times I do feel like breaking down, in fact. I'll be in Tesco's or something and see tabloid headlines. Welfare scroungers claim another so and so, and they always have these glaring headlines, especially in the Daily Express or the Daily Mail. And sometimes I feel like ripping them from the stand and just punching the editor. It's hard. It's very, very hard. And there are times in this situation where you have to force yourself to think about something else. You have to force yourself to do something monotonous, you know. Um, I do take practical measures to try and find work, but I don't blame people for giving up. I really don't. Because when you've tried time and time again, when you filled in application after application only to be rejected, it's you do give up. And smug arseholes like Jeremy Kyle really, in my opinion, anyone who thinks it's easy should be forced to go into a job centre to see just how easy it is. And the back to work programs, shameful companies like Sensia and A4E relish in putting people down. They relish in the fact that they have power over you, in the sense that if you don't obey their rules or whatever, they'll take your money away. And from day one, they treat you like a criminal. There's no question about that. In no other sort of public service, which is what they claim they are clients treated in that way. You don't go into an optician's or a dentist or a doctor and have that sort of outright rudeness or you might occasionally, but not as a standard thing. But you do with a company like A4E or Cynthia, because they believe if you're an unemployed person, then they can get away with it. And the sad truth is they can. We had a comedy in the UK called, I think it was in the League of Gentlemen. It might have been Little Britain. I think it was the League of Gentlemen. But there was always a sketch in that set in a job centre. I found that very, very funny actually. But it was also ironic because it wasn't actually that far off the mark. In that sketch, it shows someone called Pauline, and she's a really patronising cow. And she comes in and talks down to all the job seekers. Now, of course, it's a little exaggerated, but the blunt truth is, in real life, that the reality is not that far off. In fact, I've personally dealt with people who have come in and boasted about the jobs they've had and talked down to the people that they claim they're trying to help. And I do believe that sort of company attracts people who just get a kick out of having power over others, and that sickens me. Um, it's very, very hard because you do feel like you're fighting popular opinion that is influenced by the tabloid press, and also popular perceptions about work. The idea that work alone somehow defines us as people. I strongly believe it doesn't. Now, someone could be good at the job and you could be hard working, they're both arguably values, but the job status in itself is really not a barometer of character. You could be an honest, generous, benevolent person and be facing unemployment, and you could be a bullying, lying, deceptive scumbag and happen to be quite good at your job. That's a fact. So I completely reject the Protestant work ethic. I think it's beyond crap, in fact. And I don't want that to be misunderstood. I'm not against hard work. Hard work has its place. It certainly does. You know, it's better than being lazy. If you're lazy, you're not going to accomplish much. Having said that, I don't believe laziness is inherently evil in the way that other feelings are. It impacts if it impacts other people. For example, if you're living with people and you never help out, that's selfish. That isn't just lazy, it's also very selfish. And in that case, that's wrong. But if you're lazy in yourself and your laziness doesn't actually impact anyone else, um, then now obviously if you're claiming job seekers allowance, which is from the state, I think you should make efforts to try and find work. But if you're not, then laziness in itself, I struggle to see why that's such a terrible thing. Because the only person that you might be affecting is yourself. Unless that is you're living with other people and your laziness is then results in selfishness. I mean, that would annoy me if I'm living with someone and they never empty the dishwasher or they never, etc. Um, but unemployment, I hate people, really. I try not to hate people, but I find it very hard to have patience with people who think it's easy. Or for Tories, because I believe all Tories are inherently bigoted towards the unemployed, despite what they say. And even if they personally aren't, they're part of a party that is. There's no question about that. And they can gloss it over as much as they want. What it comes down to is that they're a party that are inherently will look down on you if you're unemployed. And by the way, there's certain expressions I hate. Bettering yourself. Well, I could be a successful businessman, a published author, an Olympian, etc., etc., etc. My values fundamentally won't change. I'll be in a much, much more fortunate position. I'll probably be a lot happier, but my values won't change. I'll have the same views on things like human rights. That'll never change. So the notion of bettering oneself, it's a phrase I hate. Um, it's all to do with social imagery, really, how people come across to society, and that's bullshit. I, you know, that's a very image orientated sort of statement, and I hate it. Now, I'm not saying unemployment is a good thing in itself, it's not, but not because it's morally wrong, because it's a bad place to be. That's why it's bad, not because it's a morally wrong place to be. And I'm not talking about selfishness. If you're living with people, you should help out, etc. If you're claiming job seekers allowance, if you're on welfare, you should definitely make efforts to try and find work. But other than that, you've done nothing wrong. Being unemployed is not a crime. I do believe there's Tories who not only would scrap the minimum wage, and that demonstrates their sort of thinking, but they would also bring back workhouses given half a chance. That's how this party thinks. Now, I try on some issues to be bipartisan in my outlook, but when it comes to unemployment, I don't believe that I can be, because they're so hard line on it that, the only way to fight back is with, you know, use an avalanche, an ocean of water to fight their fire kind of thing. And that's one area I can't negotiate on. Workfare is wrong. It should be scrapped, full stop. That's something I can't negotiate on. The Labour Party's come out with more responsible rhetoric. Ed Miliband has been gracious in the way he's worded things, and he has, to his credit, said things that, he's mentioned scapegoating the unemployed and criticised that and so on, which is more than what previous Labour leaders have done. In fact, they openly scapegoat the unemployed. But his party has done nothing to scrap workfare. They've made no pledges to scrap workfare. I asked that on their Facebook forum, and someone simply said, no, we won't scrap it. And I'm deeply disappointed by that. If a party that's supposedly got socialist origins won't is going to stand by workfare, then what hope do we have? So none of the big three parties is going to scrap this, and that's why for the first time in my life I'm hard pushed to know who to vote for in the general election, the next general election, which will be 3 years from now, but nevertheless, I'll be hard pushed to know. It's depressing. So yeah, in conclusion, unemployment is bloody hard, and if you think it's easy, you need to. Because even if you're not claiming welfare, you have the constant anxiety from having no money. You have the constant apprehension from, well, the frustration, the deep, deep anger from the bigotry that does exist. And, you might say, well, just ignore it, but it's hard to ignore when you see it all the time. I have enormous sympathy for anyone who's unemployed. Okay, thank you.